All right, Shabbat Shalom and welcome to United Israel World Union. This is our Sabbath morning scripture study. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are in a series on prophets, on the prophets, and this is the fourth class in that series. So I am looking forward to today's class. I'd like you to go with me this morning. Let's open up to Deuteronomy chapter 5. Deuteronomy chapter 5. We're going to get right into it this morning. And what I want to do before I go into the material for today, I want to set the stage for what led us to the position or to the place that we're currently in. The class today, by the way, is called The Unheard Words. Unheard Words. And some of you who follow our post on Facebook, I posted this little snippet that the word unheard can be defined as not heard or not listened to. And I'm going with the definition of not listened to. So the words that were not listened to. So we're going to call this class the unheard words. Go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 5. I want to begin in verse 19 in the Hebrew, which is the white space. And I want to pick up the reaction to this great event, this watershed event, this situation where God steps into, if you will, the scene of humanity at Sinai, at Horeb. And I want to begin in verse 19. Now, in the Hebrew Bible, it's verse 19. In the English, it's going to be, I believe, verse 22. But I want to begin. This is right after the completion of the 10 words. In other words, right after the end of the word number 10. And it begins, "These words, Jehovah spoke to all your assembly in the mountain out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, the thick darkness, with a great voice which was not heard again." Now, that's a bad translation, and it comes from my favorite Bible. But I want to tell you that in Hebrew, it basically indicates, this particular passage says more literally that he added no more. That Jehovah spoke the 10 words and he added no more. And he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and delivered them to me. And it came to pass when you heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, for the mountain did burn with fire, that you came near to me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders, and you said. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what the response was. I'm going to begin our class with the response of the people who witnessed this terror-filled event. You could say awe-inspiring, because that takes it down a notch maybe. But I want you to understand that this was very fear-invoking. We had darkness and clouds and doominess and lightning and sound of a shofar, and it scared them so badly that these people who witnessed it said, "Behold, Jehovah our God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. We have seen this day that God does talk with man, and he lives. Now therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of Jehovah our God any more, then we shall die. For who is there of all flesh that has heard the voice of the living God speaking out of the midst of the fires we have and lived? Go thou near and hear all that Jehovah our God shall say, and speak to us all that Jehovah our God shall speak to you, and we will hear it and do it." Now, in this particular passage, the people come up with the plan. This is just to set the stage for today's class. And they decide that they are taking their lives collectively in their own hands should they witness something like this again. So they tell Moses, you go, you hear what he says. For our part, we will listen to it and we'll do it. So their agreement is that if they just don't have to take their life into their hands, if the prophet will be that middle person, then they will comply with the message. And Moses relates this reaction of the people to Jehovah. And I want to pick up with what follows. And Jehovah heard the voice of your words when you spoke to me. And Jehovah said to me, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, which they have spoken to thee. They have well said all that they have spoken. So Jehovah accepts their agreement. He tells Moses that he thinks that this is a good thing that they have brought to him, that this whole arrangement will work. And whenever I read these words, a lot of times people say, well, I wish that this event wouldn't have happened because we want to hear directly from God. It would confirm our faith. And a lot of people believe that. But this method that was set up, this arrangement, would work as well. Now look at the next verse, because this is the way that God expresses his desires. Still Jehovah. He says, I've heard the voice of the words of this people, which they have spoken unto thee. They have well said all that they have spoken. Oh, that there were such a heart in them that they would fear me and keep my commandments always, that it might be well with them and with their children forever. And what I love about this particular passage is that, in a way, we're getting a glimpse of what God truly desires. What we read here is, in Hebrew, it's mi yitain, mi yitain. And whenever I look at this particular passage and I see this phrase, mi yitain, this is translated as, oh, that there were. The particular usage of the phrase, it's translated roughly, if only their heart was this. To fear me and to guard all my commandments all the days, and it would be good to them and their children forever. We know from countless examples in the Bible, many, many texts that talk about the fear of Jehovah is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of Jehovah. Over and over we read about that this is necessary. A fear, an awe, an awesome respect for Jehovah. And I think a lot of people, again, try to get away from the word fear as in fright, but it's bordering on that at least. There ought to be such an awesome reverence that it is on that line. And that's what was a result of what we read about here in the giving of the Torah in Deuteronomy 5 and Exodus 19 and 20. In fact, one of the things that is interesting about this, in Deuteronomy 4, we get an account where Moses refers to this event, where Jehovah speaks out of the midst of the fire on the day of assembly to the entire group of people assembled at the foot of Horeb. He calls it this great thing. Has anyone, ask now, from the beginning of time, when man was first created to this day, has any nation ever witnessed this? And the answer to that's no, even to this day. But it was meant because what Jehovah seeks is that the people that he chooses, and ultimately beyond that, would fear him and keep his commandments. This is basically the sum duty of humanity. Now, Moses, as I said here, Jehovah says, mi yitain. Oh, that they had such a heart as this. This phrase, mi yitain, is used several times in the Hebrew Bible. Moses also uses it. I want you to look with me at the book of Numbers at Bamidbar, Numbers chapter 11 and verse 29. Numbers 11 and verse 29. Now the context is that Moses has related to Jehovah the great burden of the leadership of this people. And Jehovah tells him that leadership would be distributed to others within the camp. And there was this moving of the Spirit from Moses to others. And remember the prophecy that follows and so forth. And Eldad and Medad, just to give you the context, are still prophesying in the camp, and Joshua complains about it. Now look at chapter 11, verse 29. And Moses said to him, "Envious thou for my sake? Would that all Jehovah's people were prophets, and that Jehovah would put his Spirit upon them." Now in Hebrew, where it says, "would that all God's people were prophets," it's ki yitain. It's very close, but if you look back, it says, "Umi yitain kol am Yehovah nevi'im." Oh, that all God's people were prophets, basically. So what we get here in the use of this phrase sets us up to go into today's class. We understand that Jehovah's desire, and he reveals this after the giving of the 10 words, mi yitain, oh, that the people would fear me and keep my commandments always. Moses uses it, mi yitain, oh, that all God's people were prophets. So you have, in a way, you get the desires of Jehovah and his messenger, and they go together in some ways. Because the idea is that there would be a link between God and the people, and that link would be tied to obedience. And we're going to get into that as we get into the material today. So the desire of Jehovah is that his people would fear him and keep his commandments, and everything would, as a result, go well with them and their children forever. The people, however, desired distance. The people desired safety. The people wanted a buffer between them and this awe-inspiring event. They never wanted to see it again. Remember, they said, "We've heard the voice, and we don't want to take a chance of dying. We want someone between us. And if you put someone between us, we'll listen to that someone." Jehovah, remember, says, "I have heard the voice of the words of this people which they have spoke, and all which they have spoken, all these things which they have spoken are good." So it's a good request if the people follow through. But they didn't. But they didn't. They did say that they would listen and do. They would hear and do, but they didn't. Moses had told his people in the plains of Moab this. Go with me to Deuteronomy 29. Deuteronomy 29. And I want to pick up in verse 4 in the English, I believe. Deuteronomy 29 and verse 3 in the Hebrew. "Yet Jehovah has not given you a heart to perceive, and eyes to see, and ears to hear until this day." Now, literally in Hebrew, Moses is relating to the people in the plains of Moab that they are lacking some things which would be given by God. Number one, it says in the English, a heart to perceive. And in the Hebrew, It's literally a heart to know. Lev lada'at, a heart to know. So I was curious. As I began to study and prepare for this section of our series, I wanted to know if at any point in the Hebrew Bible, this phrase, lev lada'at, is ever used again, a heart to know. Because Moses tells the people that to this day, meaning at the time this is written, that God had not given them a heart to know. So I take away a couple of points from that. At least as far as Moses is concerned, this is something that must come from Jehovah. And I wanted to see. So I did a search, and there is one other occurrence of lev lada'at, a heart to know. Go with me to the book of my favorite prophet. Need I name him? Let's see. Let's call Jeremiah chapter 24. And I want to go to verse 7. Now, in context, by the way, the white space begins at verse 4, and it goes from chapter 24, verse 4 through 7. I only want to read verse 7. And I will give them a heart to know me, and that I am Jehovah, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God, for they shall return to me with their whole heart. Now, again, this is the only other occurrence of the phrase lev lada'at, a heart to know. Notice, and it says, God, Jehovah says, and I will give them a lev lada'at, a heart to know, not just to know me. And Jeremiah picks this up, and a lot of the prophets, because they're moved and spoken through by the same Spirit, if you will, they often mention this idea of knowing Jehovah. Jeremiah talks about in Jeremiah chapter 9, where he says, he talks about how, let's just look, hold your hand here because we're going to come back to this. Go to Jeremiah 9 and 23, 22 in the Hebrew. Let not, thus says Jehovah, let not the wise man boast in his wisdom or glory in his wisdom. Neither let the mighty man boast in his might. Let not the rich man boast in his riches, but let him that boast in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am Jehovah, who exercise faithful love, justice, and righteousness in the earth, for in these things I delight, says Jehovah. The idea is that what God truly desires is that people will know him. Remember, the whole purpose when we studied the Exodus, one of the main points of the Exodus is, remember, Pharaoh says, I don't know Jehovah, but he does know him by the end, right? See, the ultimate goal is that they will all know me, Isaiah says. Jeremiah says, they will all know me from the least of them to the greatest of them. It's the whole goal of the new covenant. To know Jehovah from sea to shining sea. The knowledge of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. So go back to Jeremiah 24. Jeremiah 24, Jehovah says, I will give them a heart to know me. Notice it has something to do, the giving of the heart to know, mi yitain, Jehovah gives this heart to know him. Now the result of that is that we get this covenant language, that I am Jehovah, they will be to me for a people, and I will be, remember last week's class, and I will be to them, lahem, lelohim, for a God. But let me tell you something. It has to be, it's only brought about by the next phrase. For they will return to me with all their heart. Everything is contingent on a return, a wholehearted return, not half. I'm talking what suggests that this will be brought about, the giving of a heart to know, is contingent, and the covenant relationship being restored is contingent on a restoration, a return of the people with a whole heart. Now the question becomes, which comes first? Does Jehovah give a heart to know, which then leads them to have a wholehearted return? Or is it their efforts at a wholehearted return which brings about the giving of the heart to know? That's the question. Remember in Deuteronomy 10 and Deuteronomy 30, it talks about this idea of circumcision of heart. In one text, it says, circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart. In another text, it says, Jehovah will circumcise it. So which one is it? Could it be that somehow our will, our desire, our attempt to return is met face to face by Jehovah, who recognizes our attempt to return and meets us halfway, if you will? Could they go together? Remember, the goal is, Jehovah says, oh, that they had such a heart as this, to fear me, right? Remember when it talks about the new covenant later in Jeremiah, it says that he will put the fear of him in their hearts. Do they need the fear? Do they have the fear? And then they get, it seems to be that our efforts, our desires, our real attempt, our wholehearted attempt is met. Moses indicates that the heart to know is a gift from Jehovah. He said in Deuteronomy 29, Jehovah has yet to give you a heart to know. And then in Jeremiah, Jehovah says that he will indeed give them a heart to know, and that this will bring about this desired relationship. Ehieh, I will be lachem lelohim, to them for a God. Now, there are quite a few passages, 37 in all, which use the phrase, with all your heart, in one form or another, with all his heart, with all your heart, with all my heart. That phrase, with all the heart, in all its various forms, occurs 37 times. And there are various things. I've written papers on with all the heart, with all the soul. I'm not doing that again today. What I'm focusing on is the phrase, with all the heart. And I'm being even more specific, because there are passages which say, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. That's important. It's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about today is very specifically a return with all your heart. Now, all these other things are necessary: to love God, to serve God, to walk in all his ways with all your heart and all your soul. But again, I just want to focus on return. Go with me to the book of Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy chapter 30. Deuteronomy 30, and this is my favorite chapter in all the Bible. Deuteronomy 30. And I want to read verse 1 and 2. And it will come to pass, when all these things are come upon you, the blessings and the curse. Please understand, the children of Israel have not yet crossed into the land. He is already informing them that there is coming a time, and it will be, v'haya ki yavo, that these will come upon you, all these words, the blessings and the curse. He's telling them, you're going to have the blessings and the curses come upon you. Notice, which I have set before you, and you shall call them to mind among the nations. But that's not what it says in Hebrew. In Hebrew it says, and you will cause to return to your heart among all the nations. Now, why translators can't be that literal, I don't know. But to me, it's significant. In other words, the blessings and the curses are going to come upon you. You're going to be scattered among the nations. And then it says, and you will return to your heart among all the nations which Jehovah your God has driven you there. And you shall return to Jehovah your God and shall listen to his voice according to all that I command you this day, you and your children with all your heart, with all your soul. And then God's going to return the captivity. Very important. You're scattered among the nations because the blessings and the curses have come upon you. And what he says is that you're going to return to your heart. See, the translation here says, you'll call them to mind. I can see where they would get this. Because what happens is that this group of people who've been scattered among the nations, they've lost their identity, and something begins to happen on the inside. Now, we're going to talk in a future class about what triggers that, because I know what it is. Something happens, and inside someone says, I want to turn to Jehovah. Yeah, but we were brought up believing, I just want the truth. Something creates within this group a return to the heart. And then, with all their heart, they and their children begin to turn back to Jehovah. Shuv, to return. Look down at verse 8. I mean, the whole chapter is great, but, and you shall return and listen to the voice of Jehovah your God and do all his commandments which I command you this day. Now, isn't that interesting that we've read two of these, and both of these suggest that it has something to do with returning, yes, to shuv, to return, but also to listen to the voice of Jehovah? How is that going to be? Let's keep going. And you shall return and listen to the voice of Jehovah and do all his commandments which I command you this day. And Jehovah, your God, will make you plenteous in every work of your hands, in the fruit of your body, and the fruit of your cattle, and the fruit of your land for good. For Jehovah will again rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers. If you shall listen to the voice of Jehovah your God, to keep his commandments, his statutes that are written in this book of the Torah, and if you turn to Jehovah your God with all your heart, with all your soul. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 7. 1 Samuel chapter 7, and I just want to pick up a few of these usages in the Hebrew Bible of a wholehearted return and what that yields. Chapter 7, verse 3, 1 Samuel. And Samuel spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, if you return to Jehovah with all your hearts. And then he tells us a little bit about what that looks like. Then put away the foreign gods and the Ashtaroth from among you, and direct your hearts to Jehovah and serve him only. How about that? What does it mean to return to the heart, to turn to Jehovah with all your heart? It means that you don't have room in your heart for other deities, other gods. You serve him alone. Levado. You serve him alone. Look at 1 Kings chapter 8. 1 Kings chapter 8. Now, 1 Kings 8 is the dedicatory prayer of King Shlomo, King Solomon, at the house when the temple was dedicated. And I just want to read chapter 8, 1 Kings, verse, let's see where we need to start. Verse 47, yet if they take thought in the land where they were carried captives, and repent and make supplication to thee in the land of their captors, saying, we have sinned, have done perversely, we've committed wickedness, and so they return to you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their enemies who led them away captive, and pray to thee towards their land. You see the idea? These people are taken captive. the curse has come upon them. They're no longer in the land of the living, as the Bible refers to Eretz Israel. They're scattered. But something happens, it's another class, they turn to Jehovah with all their heart, they put away the other gods, and they seek to serve Jehovah Levado alone. Look at 2 Kings 23. 2 Kings 23. Now this is about Josiah. 2 Kings 23:25. And like him was there no king before him that turned to Jehovah with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his everything, according to all the Torah of Moses. So Josiah is the example we get of one who turned to Jehovah with all his heart. Look at Jeremiah chapter 3. Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 10. I just want to pick up a couple more of these just to have them in your mind and in your heart. Now, by the way, in Jeremiah chapter 3, this is in the days of Josiah. It's the only prophecy in the book of Jeremiah chapter 3, which is in the days of Josiah. Now remember, in the days of Josiah, there's a big revival going on, isn't there? Tents are set up. They're restoring the temple is rededicated, and everything seems to be at the height. Jeremiah's not buying it. The people feel we have the temple, it's been refurbished. We have a godly king on the throne. God is going to use this King Josiah, and everything is going to be great. The priesthood is restored. We know from 2 Chronicles 35 that the ark has been placed back in the temple. It wasn't there, by the way, when the scroll was discovered, but that's in my book. You'll see that very clearly very soon, by the way. But everything seems great. But you have one voice, Jeremiah, who says it's not real. Why is it not? Why could Jeremiah not just get excited about the good that's going on? There's a revival in the town. Because it wasn't real. And Jeremiah knew it. Listen to this. Chapter 3, verse 6. Jehovah also to me in the days of Josiah the king, have you seen that which faithless Israel has done? He's talking about the northern kingdom. Get this straight. She's gone up on every high mountain and under every green tree and has played there the harlot. And I said, after she's done all these things, she'll return to me. See, we want to return, right? That's what's needed. But she did not return. He's talking about the northern kingdom. And her treacherous sister Judah saw it. And I saw when, for as much as faithless Israel has committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce, that her treacherous sister Judah was not afraid, but went and played the harlot also. And it came to pass through the likeness of her harlotry that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and with wood. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Judah has not turned to me with her whole heart, but in pretense, says Jehovah. White space. Listen, there are people out there who recognize the biblical importance of seeing the two houses of Israel. And a lot of people believe the northern house is just so wrong, but the southern kingdom has got it all together. That's not biblical. It's not. The return that it says Judah made at the time, it says in English, in my translation here, it says they made the return in pretense. That's kind of soft. You know what the real word is? In lies. In Hebrew, it's sheker. That doesn't mean, pretense sounds like, oh, we're just kind of make-believe. No, it's a lie. It's false. Go with me to Joel chapter 2. Joel chapter 2. We have some work to do. We have a return to make. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 12. Jeremiah 2:12. Yet even now, says Jehovah, turn to me with all your heart, and with fasting, and with weeping, and with mourning, and rend your hearts, and not your garments. In other words, because people can put on a show. They can do in pretense, in a lie. They can tear the corner of their garment and say, oh, woe is me, I'm throwing dust and ashes on my head, and, no, that's not what God's talking about. Rend your hearts, not your garments, and turn to Jehovah your God, for he's gracious and merciful, slow to anger, great in love, repents of evil. Who knows whether he will not turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him, a meal offering and a drink offering for Jehovah your God. You know what God recognizes? You know what he's waiting on, this return? You know what it looks like? It has to do with a broken and contrite heart. Not this external stuff. It's a matter of the heart, is what Jehovah's looking for. And I'm not criticizing a group. I'm criticizing us. Me, Ross, you, whoever you are, you who are watching this, you who are listening. We as a people have not committed a wholehearted return. Not yet. Not yet. They didn't listen, and neither have we. What I'm talking about is I want to get into, over the course of this study, the words of the prophets. But if I don't tell you that people have not listened to the words in the past, and it's likely that you might not either, then you certainly won't. I want you to understand, here's where we broke down before. We didn't listen. Now, listen to me now. We need to listen. I want you to get this. So before I talk about the words, I want you to know that the words have been unheard. They just hadn't been listened to. Moses said, you lack a heart to know, a lev leda'at. Jehovah's going to give that heart when you make a full-hearted return. But listen to me, but you also lack a couple of other things. Let me say this better. We lack other things. You know what those are? Eyes to see and ears to hear. It's a pretty bad situation. You don't have a heart that's right. You're not looking to see, and you're not listening to hear. Other than that, we're doing fine. In other words, there's no way that the words of the prophets can go in through eyes which are closed or through ears which are stopped. Sometimes the prophet said that the people literally put their hands over their ears like they're not listening. And if Jehovah's word did get through your eyes and through your ears, either, like if you're reading and it gets through, guess what? It can't go into your heart because you don't have a heart to know. Look at Jeremiah chapter 5. Look at Jeremiah chapter 5. We need a for sure enough return. Jeremiah chapter 5 and verse 21. Actually, let's begin in verse 20. I want you to notice, declare this in the house of Jacob. Guess what? The whole group, right? And publish it in Judah, saying, hear now this, O foolish people, I'm going to tell you what that really says in a minute, and without understanding, who have eyes and see not, who have ears and hear not. Do you not fear me, says Jehovah? What was it that Jehovah really desires? That we fear him, right? So his question is, do you fear me? And the answer to that is No. No. Because if we truly feared Jehovah, things would be better. But notice, it says, foolish people, and no, let me tell you, in Hebrew, it's foolish people, ve'en lev, and no heart. No heart. Ve'en lev. It doesn't mean, what does this translation say? Foolish people and without understanding. See, that's kind of soft. You see how translate, and I love this translation, by the way. It's the best that there is, and it's bad in many ways. Because there's no reason, if someone knows Hebrew and they say, ve'en lev, what does that mean? And no heart. You're heartless. It's almost, I guess you could say it's the opposite of a knowing heart is a no heart. You could say, well, the opposite of a knowing heart is an unknowing heart. Nah, not really. You either have a heart that knows, or you don't have a heart. The whole return is contingent on a right heart. And the ve'en lev is what they're said. Now, I find it interesting that in Jeremiah chapter 5, why is this? Because he knows Deuteronomy, the scroll was discovered in his day. Jeremiah says, ve'en lev, it's a foolish people, ve'en lev, and they have eyes but don't see, ears don't hear. Where does he get that idea? He gets it from the scroll. Jehovah had agreed to speak through the agency of a prophet. The people agreed to listen. Jehovah fulfilled his part. The people didn't. Jehovah desired a people who would fear him and guard his commandments. He said, if only mi yitain, if only there was such a heart as this, to fear me, to keep my commandments. But instead, the chosen people, the segulah, the special treasure, the ones whose mission it is to bring light to the nations, to be a covenant for the people who are supposed to behave in such a way that the rest of the world says, what a great and wonderful people this is, who has a God close to them. And that's what the desire is. But guess what? That people, the one God chose, his people, ein lev, no heart. They have ears, but they don't hear. They don't listen. They have ears, they just don't listen. They have eyes, but they just don't look. They've chosen to be rebellious. But for his part, Jehovah sent messengers, prophets, over and over. I'm going to give you a few examples. Go with me to 2 Kings 17. 2 Kings 17, and I want to begin in verse 13. Then Jehovah testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes according to all the Torah which I commanded your fathers, which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. Listen, yet they wouldn't hear, but hardened their necks like the neck of their fathers. They did not believe in Jehovah their God. They rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers and his testimonies, which he testified against them, and they followed worthless paths and became themselves worthless and went after the nations that were round about them, concerning whom Jehovah had charged them that they should not do like them. It goes on and on and on. The point I want to pull out is, he says he sent his servants, the prophets, all the time, constantly, saying, turn, return, return, return. But they didn't. Look at Jeremiah chapter 7. Jeremiah chapter 7. Jeremiah 7 and verse 21. Thus says Jehovah of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings to your sacrifices and eat meat, for I did not speak to your fathers nor command them in the day that I brought them out of Egypt concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But this thing I commanded them, saying, listen to my voice, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people. There's our text again. And walk in all the ways that I've commanded you, that it may be well with you. But they did not hearken, nor incline the ear, but have walked in the counsels and in the imaginations of their evil heart, and went backward and not forward. From the day that your fathers came forth out of the land of Egypt to this day, I have sent to you all my servants, the prophets, sending them from morning until night, yet they did not hearken to me, nor incline the ear, but stiffened their neck. They did worse than their fathers. Therefore, you shall speak all these words to them. Listen to this. But they will not hearken to you. You shall call to them, but they will not answer you. But you shall say to them, this is a nation that does not listen to the voice of Jehovah their God, nor does it receive correction. Truthfulness is perished and is cut off from their mouth. From the day that they came out of Egypt, he says, he sends these prophets. Notice, my servants, the prophets, from morning until night. They didn't listen. That doesn't, listen, the prophet still has to bring the message, whether they listen or not. Look down at chapter 25, Jeremiah 25. Jeremiah 25. Verse 1, Jeremiah 25:1. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah. That was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, which Jeremiah the prophet spoke to all the people of Judah and to all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, saying, from the 13th year of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, unto this day, these 23 years, the word of Jehovah has come to me, and I've spoken to you from morning until night, but you have not hearkened. And Jehovah sent to you all his servants the prophets, sending them from morning until night, but you have not hearkened, nor inclined your ear to hear. And they said, turn back now everyone from his bad way and from the bad of your doings, and dwell in the land that Jehovah has given to you and to your fathers forever and ever. Don't go after other gods to serve them and to worship them, and do not provoke me to anger with the work of your hands, and I'll do you no harm. Yet you have not listened to me, says Jehovah, that you might provoke me to anger with the work of your hands to your own hurt. Very clearly communicated here. Jeremiah is saying, look, I came to you for 23 years, morning and night. You didn't hearken. He sent all his prophets, his servants, the prophets. Key phrase here, servants, prophets. You rejected the servants. And then Jehovah says, you've rejected me. You have not hearkened to me, saith Jehovah. Chapter 26. Chapter 26 of Jeremiah, beginning in verse 1. In the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah, came this word from Jehovah, saying, thus says Jehovah, stand in the court of Jehovah's house and speak to all the cities of Judah which come to worship in Jehovah's house. All the words that I command you to speak to them. Leave nothing out. Perhaps they'll hearken and turn every man from his evil way, that I may relent of this evil which I purpose to do to them because of their evil of their doings. And you shall say to them, thus says Jehovah, if you will not listen to me, to walk in my Torah which I have set before you, to hearken to the words of my servants the prophets whom I send to you, sending from morning to night, but you have not hearkened, then will I make this house like Shiloh, and will make this a city a curse to all the nations of the earth. Look, a lot of people want to see the temple rebuilt, right? They find prophecies that suggest, here, we got to rebuild the temple. Let me tell you this. Please mark this down and understand it clearly. If you build the most beautiful house right now, you get the contractors, you get the parts, you work out the peace agreements with this administration or another. It doesn't matter. Everybody shakes hands. There's love and peace and kumbaya. And you build that temple again, it'll be torn down if people don't have their heart right. The building of the house is not going to do anything. It's not. And Jeremiah had to go into the house that was just restored. Josiah, look, everybody thought that this was great. Josiah's a godly king. We got revival in the land. We've got a great kids program here. We've got the sacrifices are reinstated. 2 Chronicles 35 says the ark is back in the place, and it didn't work. The most righteous king, guess what? Josiah is killed by an arrow on the battlefield by Necho. I thought things were going right. And the temple was destroyed. It had been refurbished. There weren't any idols in it, right? I mean, it had been cleaned out. They have the Torah, they got the ark, they got the sacrifices. You can smell the sweet aroma. Heart wasn't right. And it will always be the same way if the heart is not right first. You have to get the heart. That's why I'm doing this before we worry about talking about prophecies of rebuilding a house of prayer for all nations. You got to get the heart right first. Look, there are a lot of these. I'll just give you a couple more, and I'm all in Jeremiah right now. So just to make it easy, go to Jeremiah 35. Jeremiah 35 and verse 12. Then came the word of Jehovah to Jeremiah, saying, thus says Jehovah of hosts, the God of Israel, go and tell the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, will you not receive instruction to hearken to my words, says Jehovah? The words of Jonadab, the son of Rekhav, that he commanded his sons not to drink wine has been kept. He wants to use this as an example. He wants to show you, this is what obedience looks like. The Rekhabites, listen. For to this day they drink none, but obey their father's commandment. Yet I have spoken to you from morning till night, but you didn't hearken to me. I've also sent to you all my servants the prophets, sending them from morning till night, saying, return now every man from his evil way and amend your doings, and don't go after other gods to serve them. Then you'll dwell in the land which I have given to you and to your fathers. But you've not inclined your ear, nor hearkened to me. For the sons of Jonadab, the son of Rekhav, have kept the commandment of their father, which he commanded them. But this people has not hearkened to me. He said the Rekhabites are a good example. They listen to their father. You don't. You want an example of what to do in terms of following, you look at the Rekhabites, not the Israelites. I mean, that's what Jehovah said. Look at Jeremiah 44. 44 and verse 4. And again, this is not being critical of any group. This is critical of every group. Please understand the difference. Nobody need get defensive. Jeremiah 44, verse 4. Yet I sent to you all my servants the prophets, sending them from morning till night, saying, oh, don't do this horrible thing, this abominable thing that I hate. But they listen not, nor incline their ear to turn from their wickedness, to burn no incense to other gods, so that my fury and my anger was poured out forth and kindled in the cities of Judah, and so forth. Okay? Now, go with me to Zechariah. Zechariah. And I want to read chapter 1, Zechariah 1, beginning in verse 2. Jehovah, Zechariah 1, 2. Jehovah's been much displeased with your fathers. Therefore say to them, thus says Jehovah of hosts, turn to me, says Jehovah of hosts, and I will return to you, says Jehovah of hosts. Don't be like your fathers, to whom the former prophets, literally the first ones, the prophets, the first ones, to whom the former prophets cried, saying, thus says Jehovah of hosts, turn now from your evil ways and from your evil doings. But they did not listen or hearken unto me, says Jehovah. Your fathers, where are they? And the prophets, do they live forever? But my words and my statutes which I commanded my servants the prophets, did they not overtake your fathers, so that they repented and said, as Jehovah of hosts intended to do to us according to our ways and according to our doings, so has he dealt with us. And finally, look at Daniel. Daniel chapter 9. In Daniel 9, verse 6. And let's see. And have rebelled and turned aside from your precepts, from your judgments. For we have not hearkened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, our fathers, to all the people of the land. Look down at verse 9. To Jehovah our God belong mercy and forgiveness, for we've rebelled against him. We've not obeyed the voice of Jehovah our God to follow his Torah, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. What do the servants the prophets do? They set the instruction before the people. Yea, all Israel have transgressed your Torah, turned aside so as not to listen to your voice. Therefore, the curse is poured out upon us in the oath that's written in the Torah of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. It was not enough. It was not enough that the people didn't listen to the prophets. It'd be one thing if they just said, I don't want to listen to that. I don't want to, I'm not religious. I really just don't want to listen to the words of the prophets. That'd be one thing. But they tried to kill, and in some cases did kill the prophets. This is not just a problem in the north. We have the story in 1 Kings 18, 19, Ahab and Jezebel. Everybody knows they're wicked as hell, right? But Ahab and Jezebel, they kill all these prophets. And Elijah flees, and he's met at the cave, 1 Kings 19. And one of the things that he says is, they've killed your prophets, and I torn down your altars, and only I am left. And they're trying to kill me. They killed your prophets with the sword. So we know of that. We know of Ahab and Jezebel. But there's more than that. They tried to kill Jeremiah. Look with me, Jeremiah 11. Jeremiah 11. And it says in verse 19, this is Jeremiah, I was like a gentle lamb brought to the slaughter, and I knew not that they had devised devices against me, saying, let us destroy the tree with its fruit, and let us cut him off from the land of the living, that his name may be no more remembered. Isn't that interesting, that language? It sounds so familiar to us from Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. This is he's like a lamb brought before the slaughter, trying to cut off from the land of the living. Look down at verse 21. Therefore, thus says Jehovah concerning the men of Anatot that seek your life, saying, prophesy not in the name of Jehovah that you die not by our hand. The men of Anatot, that's not just like the good old boys in the neighborhood of Anatot. Who lives in Anatot? Anybody know? Very clearly articulated, very clearly stated in the Bible. In Anatot, it's a priestly city. These are priests. These are the ones, look at Numbers chapter 4, for example. These are the ones who are the priests, the sons of Aaron, who were designated to take care of the holiest things. So when it says the men of Anatot who want to kill Jeremiah, guess what? That's the religious people want to kill him. Now look at chapter 2 of Jeremiah. Go back with me, Jeremiah 2. We have some problems. Look, the Bible doesn't hide the fact that we've got some issues here. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 29. Why will you contend with me? You all have transgressed against me, says Jehovah. In vain have I smitten your children. They receive no correction. Your own sword has devoured your prophets like a devouring lion. And look at Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 26. Nehemiah 9:26. Nevertheless, they were disobedient and rebelled against you, cast your Torah behind their backs, and slew the prophets who forewarned them to turn them to thee, and they committed great blasphemy. It's one thing if you just don't listen, but not only did they listen, they attempted to kill, and in some cases did kill the prophets that were sent to them. These passages reflect a wide span of time, from the time of Elijah, let's say, all the way up through the end of the biblical period, if you will, through the end of the destruction by the Babylonians. And even beyond, when they came back, Nehemiah is referencing, this is, 515 BCE. And it involves the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. So it's not like you go, well, that's just, Elijah, that he's talking to the north. No, this idea to silence and even kill the prophets was both. Go with me to Isaiah 6. Isaiah chapter 6. Verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw Jehovah sitting upon a throne. Actually, in the Hebrew, it's Adonai. I saw Adonai sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up. His train filled the temple. Seraphim stood above him. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, 2 he covered his feet. With 2 he did fly. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is Jehovah of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the post of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, it's Isaiah, woe is me, for I am ruined, because I'm a man of unclean lips. And I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. And one of the seraphim flew to me, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from off the altar. And he laid it on my mouth and said, Lo, this has touched your lips, and your iniquity is taken away, your sin is purged. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Hineni, here am I, send me. And he said, go and tell this people, hear indeed, but understand not. See indeed, but perceive not. Make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and smear over their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return and be healed. Do you understand that this encounter, when Isaiah is in this vision in the throne room, this is the call of Isaiah. This is the beginning of his ministry, if you will. We learn in Isaiah 1:1 that he is a prophet in the days of Uzziah, beginning in Uzziah, where here it is. In the year that Uzziah dies, he's taken in this vision, and he beholds in the throne room the king. The king says, who will go for us? We have a special mission. He says, send me. And the mission is this. It's a command of the king from heaven. I don't want them to understand and turn and be healed. The heart, the eyes, and the ears, all of which are necessary. We learn that in Deuteronomy 29. We see it in Jeremiah 5. We see it elsewhere. The return can't happen at that time. They had chosen, and Jehovah gives them what they chose, namely a fat heart, heavy eyes, or heavy ears, and blinded eyes. Now, this is going to be for a period of time. We're going to get into this next week. In other words, how long, right? We're going to talk about that. But even with this, knowing that the words of the prophets are going to be rejected, they still have to go. Even though they know that their message won't be received, they still have to go. Let's look at Ezekiel chapter 2. Ezekiel chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. And he said to me, Ezekiel 2:1, Son of man, stand upon your feet, and I will speak to you. And the Spirit entered into me when he spoke to me. Interesting. I want you to understand that this is one very clear passage. Notice in the Hebrew, it literally says, and the Spirit entered into me. A lot of times, growing up in church, I was told the Spirit would come upon the Old Testament prophets. The hand of the Lord came upon, but it didn't come in. Now that Christianity's come, but this is what it says. The Spirit entered into me, right? And stand upon your feet, and I'll speak to you. And the Spirit entered into me when he spoke to me and set me on my feet. And I heard him that spoke to me, and he said to me, Son of man, I sent thee to the children of Israel, to rebellious tribes that have rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me to this very day. For the children are defiant, stiff-hearted. I do send you to them, and you shall say to them, Thus says Jehovah God, and they, whether they will listen or whether they will refuse to listen, because they are a rebellious house, yet they shall know that there's been a prophet among them. White space. And you, son of man, be not afraid of them, neither be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns be with you, and you do sit upon scorpions. Don't be afraid of their words, nor dismayed at their looks, for they are a rebellious house. And you shall speak my words to them, whether they will hear or whether they will refuse to hear, for they are most rebellious. Spirit enters into him. He's told to go speak. He's warned it's not going to be easy. And oh, by the way, whether they listen or not, you still do it. Don't be afraid. Here he tells Jeremiah, don't break down before them or I will break you down before them. It's a tough message. Look at Ezekiel 3, beginning in verse 4. And he said to me, Son of man, go, get thee to the house of Israel and speak with my words to them. You are not sent to a people of a strange speech and of a hard language, but to the house of Israel. Not to many people of strange speech and of a hard language, whose words you cannot understand. Surely, had I sent you to them, they would have listened to you. But the house of Israel will not listen to you, for they will not listen to me. For all the house of Israel are defiant and hard-hearted. Behold, I've made your face hard against their faces, and your forehead strong against their forehead. Like adamant, harder than flint have I made your forehead. Fear them not, neither be downcast at their looks, for they are a rebellious house. Moreover, he said to me, Son of man, all my words that I will speak to you, take to your heart and hear with your ears. And go, get thee to the exiles, to the children of your people, and speak to them, and tell them, thus says Jehovah God, whether they will hear or whether they will refuse to hear. Doesn't matter. You're going to go, and you're going to say these things. They probably won't listen because they're rebellious. Notice he says, if I were sending you to someone of another language, another people, they would listen. Jonah gets that example, right? Jonah goes to Nineveh. Nineveh later plays into the story, later plays into our story. Nineveh, the Ninevites, you know. But he goes to them and they repent in sackcloth and ashes. And it's real. And God spares them. Not Israel. Jehovah tells Ezekiel, in fact, later, if you don't tell them what I tell you to tell them, their blood is on you. If they don't listen, it's on them if you spoke it. But if you don't tell them, it's on you. And they listen, but they didn't really hear. They used to like to listen to Ezekiel. I mean, it was entertaining. Like they would have subscribed to his YouTube channel. They would have loved to download iPods of Ezekiel. Not that they would change the way they lived. Look at Ezekiel 33. Oh yeah, they love listening to him. Ezekiel 33, verse 30. As for you, son of man, the children of your people who talk against you by the walls and in the doors of the houses speak one to another, everyone to his brother, saying, Come, I pray you, and hear what is the word that comes from Jehovah. And they come to you as the people come, and they sit before you, my people, and they hear your words, but they don't carry them out. For it's become flute music in their mouths, while their heart is set on unjust gain. And lo, you are to them like a song for flutes by one who has a pleasant voice and can play the instrument well. They hear your words, but they don't carry them out. But when it comes to pass, see, it's coming, then they will know that a prophet has been among them. They would log in and listen to him. But too worried about defending themselves. See, I'm not trying to point a finger at this group or that group, so people don't have to say, well, not me, you're not talking to me. What if we all said, what part of this message do I need to make progress on? Where is it that I've not been wholehearted in my return to Jehovah? What if that were our reaction instead of block, 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 not me, I'm righteous, we're righteous, we've made. The idea The refusal to hear, the refusal to listen leads to disastrous consequences. Look at Isaiah 29. Now, I'm sure that as I worked through some of these texts, people jumped ahead of me and said, oh, what about this verse? These are being presented in the order that they are for a reason. Isaiah 29, beginning in verse 9. Amaze yourself and be amazed. Blind yourselves and be blind. Be drunk, but not with wine. Stagger, but not with strong drink. For Jehovah has poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and has closed your eyes, the prophets, and covered your heads, the seers. And the vision of all this has become to you as the words of a book, or a scroll, not a roll, a scroll, sefer, that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, read this, I pray you. And he says, I cannot, for it's sealed. The book is then delivered to him that is not learned, saying, pray this, read this, I pray you. And he says, I'm not learned. But really, what this is talking about in verse 11 and 12 is you have a sealed scroll, and it's given to one who knows the scroll. The word read isn't in there. That's English translation. It just says, to one that knows the scroll. And he says, read this, basically. And he says, I can't, because it's sealed. What does it mean, a sealed scroll? You mean you can't read it? And that's to the one who's learned. And then you give it to one who's not learned, and he says, I'm not learned in the scroll. What brought this on? Why is it that the scroll, the seal, why is it that the book is sealed? What book are we talking about that's sealed? And why is it sealed? Let me tell you why it's sealed. Well, let's let Isaiah tell us why, because Jehovah says it through him. And Jehovah said, verse 13, because this people draw near with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me. And their fear towards me, remember that's what he wants, is their heart. He wants their fear toward him, and he wants them to keep commandments. But that's not what they did. Here's what they did. Their heart is far from him. Their fear that he needs is as a commandment of men learned by rote. It's not the commandments of Jehovah. This people is all hooked on the commandments of men. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder, for the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of the prudent men shall be hid. You know why? Because the return is not wholehearted. They can't read the book. The sefer, what are we talking about here? You're going to learn. The sefer is sealed, and the ones who are learned, you think you can bring it to them and go, here, read this to me. And he says, it's sealed. You take it to somebody that's not learned, you read it, I can't read it. I don't even know the scroll. And then on top of everything, as you work through this, you realize that the whole thing, the wisdom of the wise will perish because it's not been wholehearted. The Bible says that people are going to search to and fro, trying to gain understanding. Their quest, they're searching. Look, there is a famine in the land of hearing the words of Jehovah. You got plenty of people giving the words of the commandments of men. You have plenty of people pontificating on what certain sages said or what certain preachers said or whatever. Again, it's not being critical of it's tell us what does the Scripture say. Either we want to know what it says or we don't. If we don't want to know what it says, if we're happy where we are, then that's exactly where this Bible says everybody's been for thousands of years. So it's, we just keep doing what we're doing. Perhaps, by the way, Jeremiah chapter 12, verse 2, let me just go there real quickly, because whenever I read about this false return, they draw near with their mouth, but their heart is far from me. Jeremiah 12:2 says basically the same thing. You have planted them, indeed, they have taken root. They grow, indeed, they bring forth fruit. You are near in their mouth and far from their inward parts. What this tells me is that there are times in history, and in some ways we're beginning to go through another opportunity of returning. But remember, all that outside stuff doesn't matter. We've had plenty of those. We've had plenty of attempts. How many times has the temple been standing? And how many times has it been torn down? Been torn down one more time than it's been stood up, is that right? Or at least the same amount of times? It's been thousands of years. Whereas people are focused on, let's get that external stuff done. We've had 2,000 years to work on the internal and still hadn't really devoted any time to that. Perhaps most importantly to mention is the sealed scroll. What is the sealed scroll? And who or what will open the sealed scroll? And when will it happen? Well, we'll talk about that next week. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. See you next Saturday.